Hello and welcome back to Rufus, my Audi A2, and to WOM Automotive, who are the UK's only A2 specialist. Now you might think that I'd have to travel hours to get to the only specialist in the country, but fortunately for me, they're just round the corner.
Rob and Marcus at WOM are the nicest two guys you will meet. Although they are technically a VAG specialist, they spend a good chunk of their time with A2s, and Rob even has the rare and imported from Germany 1.2 TDI 100 miles per gallon version of the A2.
I brought Rufus to what is essentially car hospital because he still has an issue with a misfire, and also I'd kind of like to know his general condition. So WOM have looked over this car for me. First of all, it's fairly good news. Underneath the car is quite solid. They always look a bit crusty in the various steel parts that they have underneath, but the rear axle is solid. The front wishbones, which can be a bit of a disaster on these cars, they're famous for basically just giving way when you have no idea that's going to happen, and you know, it's quite dangerous. Later cars had a worse type of front wishbone, which was a pressed steel, and it could actually fail from within, so an MOT tester wouldn't pick it up. And this car is a later model, so I was a little bit worried about that. I know that Harry from Cars and Custard, he's got an A2, and that happened to him, and he lost steering and everything when he was driving along. It's quite scary. But this car, it has the earlier cast steel wishbones, and they are much more solid, and although they can look a bit rusty, they are solid in the middle. They're not just going to give way without any notice.
The rear spring cups are relatively thin metal and can rot through, but these are still solid. You can also see that new rear coil springs have been fitted fairly recently. It could all use a good coating of underbody protection, that's for sure.
The rest of it is things like, it probably does need various bits of ball joints and CV joints and things. I think the last whoever did the MOT on this car was a little bit favourable to it, shall we say.
While under there, Marcus noticed that the washer bottle is from an A2 with headlight washers. Perhaps the car took a knock underneath at some point and the bottle had to be replaced.
The other thing that was good news is that I've had a bit of an issue with this gearbox ever since I got the car. It's been real stiff and notchy. The gears, it's taken me a bit of getting used to. They feel really notchy, and I can't tell whether it's notchy in a good way, like some sort of sporty Audi TT, or notchy in a bad way, like just an old horrible gearbox. Well, Marcus has sorted that out. Just as part of the inspection, he managed to just fix the linkage, and now it's really slick, really nice. It's actually quite a nice gear change, whereas previously I had to find exactly where it was, and it felt like the whole gear selector was over to this side, so finding third was difficult. First and second, sometimes you had to really force it in, but now that's nice. And now, unfortunately, we must talk about the slightly less good news, and that involves a thing under here, which is the 1.4 litre petrol engine that Rufus has. Now, you may remember that it had a little issue with a misfire, and that has not gone away. In the last video I did a little compression test on this car. It was low in one of the cylinders, the one that keeps coming up as the misfiring cylinder, which is bad news. Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. So what Marcus suspects is going on is that there is an issue with the valves. These engines, they do tend to have valve problems rather than, say, piston rings or anything like that. Usually the exhaust valves, and they basically wear out, the guides go, and they cause sort of misfires. Now, what's annoying is that it's basically the ECU, the brain of this car, is the problem, because the engine doesn't run that badly. It's just a little bit lumpy, and it's definitely not like a real problem, really big misfire that would be, dangerous to drive or bad for the engine. But unfortunately, after it detects so many of these little blips, it shuts down one of the cylinders and goes into limp mode. And that tends to happen when the car's left idling for a little bit of time, and maybe you're at some lights, or you've just got back in the car and you start it up. It'll go into this 3-cylinder mode, and it's horrendous. Although some of these A2s are meant to be 3-cylinder, this one isn't, it's definitely a 4. I've just done 300 miles in this car, and it literally didn't have that issue the whole time. No engine light, nothing. And then this morning, as I brought it here, it came back, which in a way is good, because you want the car to actually have the issue when you bring it to the specialists at the car hospital. But it means that, most of the time this car is okay, but I can't really rely on it. I don't know when it's going to go into this limp mode, and it's not very pleasant when you're on the motorway, I must say. Were it just the things underneath that needed doing, bits of suspension and you know, wishbones and stuff, I think I'd get that done. I'd spend the money and I'd get this car sorted. But the fact that it also needs this cylinder head job, basically it's going to need, you know, refurbished valves and head off and all that jazz. That's not going to be that cheap, and you know, I bought this car for 950 quid. Unfortunately, I don't think, you know, I don't really have the ability to sort the cylinder head out. These things as a project, you know, even as a thing to break, these cars are worth something like £500 or £600, because even the shell in itself is worth 150 quid, which is more than what you'll get for scrap for most cars that weigh this much. And then you've got all things like wheels and tyres and, you know, various components that are worth something. It might be sad news for Rufus, I don't know. I mean, you know, feel free to let me know what you think I should do with him. You know, he's got MOT until July next year, and in theory I can keep driving it round, but limp mode is no fun. It would be a shame to part this car out, but at the same time, you know, his various bits and parts would go on to help other A2s. It'd be a bit like an organ donor for other needy cars. Or I could try and sell this car on as a project to somebody and they could sort it out, because, you know, I mean, Marcus, who was looking at the car, he definitely thinks that, you know, it's not worth scrapping, it's worth saving. It would be good if somebody could do that. I don't really have the tools or abilities to sort this car out, but somebody else might. We'll go for a little drive anyway, at least try out this new gearbox, which is absolutely a game changer for driving this car. Oh, I think I'd sort of gotten used to how horrible it was, but it's so much better. And as you can see now, like the engine, absolutely fine, enough to just accelerate my sunglasses out of that little pouch there. And as I say, I've done 300 miles in this car. Well, I've done 500 miles in this car total. That issue has cropped up now and again, but I drove it all the way down to the British Motor Museum recently, down motorway and everything, 70 miles an hour, no problems. And yet, obviously, this morning it came back. So it's a really frustrating kind of issue, but it is a fabulous car, this. I really have enjoyed driving it, and, you know, it will be a shame if I have to move this car on, because for one, if anyone's watched Misha's recent video of this car going around the Nürburgring, how absolutely amazing was that? Like 1.4 litre petrol A2 with slightly different suspension, and it was absolutely amazing around the Nürburgring, which is just, you know, this car does handle. I've really enjoyed, you know, flipping it through the twisty bends, and you don't have to push it really hard or anything. It just handles really nicely because it's so lightweight. All of the weight is low down because the body, the aluminium shell, is so light. So although this car is tall and thin, it doesn't act like a tall and thin car. It acts like a squat and short car. When it cruises along on the motorway, fine. You know, it's got that Audi quality, that build quality of like, and refinement and stuff, so you can do long distance in it. I didn't feel tired after that long journey. It kind of does everything quite well for a little car. So yeah, I mean, I could probably keep on driving this for short distances or journeys that think it'll manage, but it's annoying to have to like turn the engine off and on again in order to get that issue to clear. Anyway, of course, a massive thank you to Rob and Marcus at WOM Automotive. They are the guys that you need to go to if you have an A2. People will come from all over the place. He was saying that somebody had come down from Glasgow recently to have their car looked at, because although the A2 in some ways is a Volkswagen Polo, there are things about this car that need that knowledgeable specialist touch. And don't forget to comment down below and tell me what you think I should do with this car. Whether I listen to you or not will remains to be seen. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.